Let's go. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Faris Sadiq, as you all know. I'm currently a research fellow at the NIH, and I wanted to thank you guys all for coming today and thank our beautiful panelists for agreeing to come and speak to you all. I'm super excited for this. And I'm just going to start by letting the panelists introduce themselves, and I'll start with Dr. Gibbs.
Hi, my name is Dr. Iris Gibbs. I am a professor of radiation oncology and a professor of neurosurgery at Stanford. I have served in the role of Associate Dean for MD Admissions at Stanford for nearly a decade before recently stepping out of that role. But I bring with me a wealth of knowledge in this space and a wealth of enthusiasm for all of the students like Ferris who are on this journey towards medical education. So I look forward to the panel.
Thank you. Dr. DeLisser, you can go next.
Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Dr. Horace DeLisser. I'm a pulmonary critical care specialist at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm also the Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at Penn for our medical students, a role I have filled since 2012. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation and being able to share a little bit of wisdom to the audience.
Dr. Reed?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Dr. Andrea Ewing-Reed, and I'm a gastroenterologist and hepatologist at Mass General Hospital. And I'm the Associate Dean for Student and Multicultural Affairs at Harvard Medical School. I also serve on the admissions committee here at HMS. And I met Ferris actually at AMAC, and he's been putting this panel together, I think, for almost a year. So I'm so proud of him for doing this and proud to be a part of his support team. So thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to tackling some of these questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Ms. Linda Jackson.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Linda Jackson. I am the director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion Community Engagement at Yale School of Medicine. And I've been at this work for a very long time. And I also met Ferris at a, it was an SNMA, was it last year?
Yeah.
Or the year before last. He came to the table and we exchanged numbers, and we know some of the same medical students, and we stayed in very close touch. So thank you for inviting me to this. And I'm really hoping that the information that we will share with you would be very important. You'll see it as valuable. Hopefully you have a pen and paper, old school. Well, that's old school. Well, maybe you have your phone to write notes. I'm sorry, you see, I'm aging myself. Hopefully, have your phones available to take notes, because I'm sure, the information that you'll receive, you may not need it now, but you'll need it down the road. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you guys all so much. I know everyone here is super grateful for this session. Truly am. And I'm just going to get started right away with the questions because we do have a lot. And there's no particular order of how you guys can go in the same order of introductions, and you all don't have to answer, but if you guys do, that would be even better so everyone can get a different perspective. And so my first question that I'm going to start with is every year students end up spending thousands of dollars applying to medical school when they just aren't ready. What are the qualities of a strong applicant, and how should students self-evaluate to make sure they are strong enough to apply to medical school?
So I don't mind just starting off answering that question. I think first of all, there's a book called it's not a book here. I keep aging myself. There's an online subscription. It's the MSAR Medical School Admissions Requirements. I would say that will be probably, outside of going to the, various websites or whatever. I think with the MSAR, you'll get like an overview of every single school there is in the United States. One thing with websites, you only know which ones to look at, but with MSAR, it'll have all the requirements, the mission statements, what the various schools are looking for. And basically it will tell you the things that you're looking for, into each medical school. And then that will kind of tell you like that self-evaluation of what schools you should or should not be applying to. And I'm not just talking about like MCAT, that's there. And I'm not just only talking about MCAT and the um what's it, your GPA, it's also talk about, they'll also talk about like research, the city, various things that, other things than just MCAT and GPAs. So I would say start there.
I'd like to weigh in on this question. How does a student know that they are, ready to be applying for medical school? I am not a fan of extinguishing anyone's dreams. And so I think that whatever brought you to that space of feeling as though this is the direction you would like to go into, I'd like to nurture that, but understanding also that there are some general prerequisites, some general experiences that I think virtually every medical student or entering medical student, pre-medical student should have under their belt. And so to really make sure that you're connected with that community of individuals so that you understand what I would consider a basic checklist of things. And the checklist is just the basics because that one alone will not get you in. But understanding that we recommend some exposures and experiences that will give you a sober sense of what profession you're actually entering. So that's the reason why I think having those clinical experiences and more often at places like at my medical school, having research experiences is important. So understand what is your individual passion and have that connected to the kinds of medical schools that you're interested in, and make sure that you have depth in those, enough depth in those experiences that you can provide a real compelling application. So as was mentioned, it's not completely about the metrics, but I would say that doing strongly on the metrics will at least keep doors open for you. I'm not in here to extinguish dreams because I know of plenty of medical students who have actually soared despite having lower metrics. And so with the holistic review that we do, we make sure that we're selecting students whose their own passion shows a thread of depth in those areas that not just create, but is a compelling story for us to say, hey, yeah, this is a place where we could help you develop those streams. So how do you know you need to apply? I mean, how you know when to apply? It's when those things are satisfied in your application. And you can talk to folks like us to be able to get a good sense of when that might be.
Thank you
I
all.
think to,
Dr. Delisha,
to
go ahead.
what to what my two colleagues have said, I think it's important to, in some ways, let go of the haste, the rush, the pressure to, I think a lot of students have in mind a plan. All right, I'm going to do this, then do this, then do that. Okay. And I think to what my two colleagues have said, I think being able to think about, what do I want to do? What are the things that are important to me? How do I develop and kind of nurture the passions that I have? And keeping in mind, what's the goal? And what do I need to do to get there? So if, for example, you need to take a gap year, that's not a sign of failure or a catastrophe. No, it's what I need to do to ultimately get to my goal. I don't have enough shadowing. Oh, but I feel like I have to apply now. Slow it down. Slow it down. So I think in addition to what has been said, being able to keep what the goal is and make the necessary steps or changes in the plan that you need to make to ultimately get to where you need to go. If you need to repeat the MCAT, that's okay. Do that.
It's definitely a marathon and not a sprint, right?
It sure is.
If you need to, okay, I guess I need to bring my fourth year, my senior year, into the GPA. Okay, I'll do that. I did not get to do all of the leadership that I wanted to do. All right, you know what? Let me take a couple of gap years and get that. So I think in some ways just being able to liberate yourself from the maybe some ways an arbitrary timetable too. Like, what's the goal and what do I need to do to get there?
I would add, just for context, that and I since our schools really see the same applicants, I just sort of put it in context that for our school, 75% of our matriculated students have had at least one gap year and 50% have had two. So not only is there no rush, in fact, the majority of folks that end up at our school have had at least one gap year, and some have had two or three. And what it does is it rounds out the application in a way that I think for all of us that are MDs on here already, we came in a different time where that straight arrow, straight through was the way that most people went. So to take a gap year was unusual. Now to go straight through for our school, it's only 25% of the class. It's not held against you if you decide to go straight through, but I think that individuals are seeing just what Dr. DeLisser said and what Dr. Gibbs said and what Linda Jackson said is that there's no rush and you really want to round out your application. And that sometimes doesn't happen in 4 years. And in fact, if I had it to do over and it was a time of gap years, I think I would have really appreciated that.
Yeah,
And
I echo the
go
same
ahead, Doc. Yes,
similar observations here with the gap years. I would say that the one and I don't want students to feel like, oh well, I'm required to do
Not
that.
at all.
If
No.
if you have really developed that passion sort of early and you had all those opportunities to be able to develop your portfolio and you are ready by the time you finish, then that one's fine too. I would say the subgroup of folks who I see that most in are individuals who feel really strong, are strong applicants for our MD, PhD programs. There's probably not much gained by adding additional gap years unless you really are solidifying that research experience or that scholarship. So for those applicants, I'd say, hey, kind of get
Just
in
go.
because you're gonna have a longer journey ahead.
I guess one more thing before we move from this. I think at times the elephant in the room is that mom and dad are saying, "You're doing what?
Yes.
How are you going to live? How are you going to pay for this? What are you going to do?" And so I think this is where I think we mentioned this earlier, getting good advice and yes, having a plan. But again, I think it's okay to figure out what you need to do, figure out your schedule, and then go with it.
Thank you all for that insight. I really appreciate it. The second question, this is a follow-up kind of to the first question, is do you guys believe there's like a difference between being ready to apply to medical school and being ready to be a medical student?
Absolutely. I can start this one and just say absolutely. There's a difference from being ready to apply. And Dr. Gibbs brought this up, right? You have these metrics and everyone's thinking about the things that round out that application. There's lots of ways to look against these other websites and compare your metrics if that's what you're into. But being ready to be a medical student is not about metrics.
No.
There is so much more that the metrics and the way that you interview and all of that, that's what brings you into the door. But being a medical student, you bring all of those same skills and now you learn material that you've never been exposed to at a pace that I don't care where you went to college. It is different. And in a cooperative kind of learning environment for our school and all the schools represented here, there's some case-based thing. You're learning differently. You're learning new material that's foreign to most people, and you're learning it at a pace that is not a college pace. So being able to get the metrics is one thing. Being ready to engage in medical school is a very different thing. And so maybe the gap years help with that for people that take it. They get a little bit of a break and come in refreshed. For others, there's raring to go, and that's perfect as well. But it is a transformative learning environment for almost everyone. At least that's my experience of over 20 years of mentorship. Medical school is a different experience.
And I would say that the way that you learned as an undergrad, you have to be ready to learn in a totally different way, because how you learned in undergrad may not work for you, as you're going through medical school. And I think one of the things also you have to be ready to ask for help.
Yeah. And I'd also add that, I think what we're saying is that the learning environment, the purpose of the learning environment is very, very different. And some people have up until that point been in a very competitive environment. Competitive meaning competing against, individual students, only 1A or whatever. In many of our schools, like, at Stanford, for example, our pre-clerkship courses are not graded except for pass fail. And that actually creates a learning environment where folks can be more collaborative. And you'll find that that sort of learning environment develops what we call that professional identity formation is the beginning of that, understanding how you work well with others. And so if one does not shift in the way that they're thinking, they will find that even though they've done really well before in a collaborative teamwork environment, if you aren't thriving in that sort of way, you may not fare as well. So all of those things make being a medical student and being ready, having the frame of mind to be ready to be a medical student is very, very different from that individualized journey of applying to medical school.
I don't want to sound like I'm trying to promote gap years, but I want to come back to something that Dr. Reed alluded to, which has also been my experience with like coming out of the pandemic. And I think particularly if students are at competitive schools or have been environments that have been very challenging for them, that being able at times to take some time to kind of recharge and to re-energize can be quite important. So you asked Farah about being ready. I think being kind of either whether it's physically or emotionally ready for medical school. And so I also think you need to consider like, am I ready to jump into this? Or do I have the energy and the zest for this? And I've had some students in recent years where I think in retrospect, they needed a gap year or they needed some time to slow down. So in terms of your question about readiness, I would also think about, am I emotionally, physically, spiritually ready? And I think sometimes there may be value in, again, taking time to, in your case, you're doing research, and, gaining other experiences that, again, may kind of recharge you and allow you to enter medical school with the energy and zest you need to succeed.
Actually, thank you guys all for that clarification. And I'm going to move on to the next question now. And this one is more about kind of the courses for pre-meds to take in their undergraduate career. So what do you guys think are helpful for pre-meds to take besides the basic med school prerequisites, the biology, chemistries, organic chemistry? What other courses do you think are helpful for them going into medical school? I know I've heard from people like immunology is a good course to take, or maybe biostats or stuff like that, but I just wanted to hear your guys' perspective on that.
Well, as a former dean of admissions, but uniquely at a school that has no required coursework. I know many medical schools do have required coursework outlined, just as you've mentioned. Much of that is informed by either the preparation that we believe that you'll need for what I now call the new MCAT, but that one started in 2015. The MCAT that also adds in behavioral sciences and social sciences and humanities into that work. But I think more than anything, it's about intellectual curiosity, being able to really delve into wider ranges of material that makes for a more well-rounded individual. Now, in terms of preparing you for medical school, so many medical students, at least at my school, come from so many different backgrounds. Some have come with not as much foundational science because they, majored in, humanities or did something different. And just as Dr. Reed said, on day one, this is an entirely different experience, and almost no matter where you've come from, no matter whether you majored in the sciences or engineering. You're all oftentimes starting together day one in a similar space, or very quickly will be at a place where you're all sort of learning together. So I think the coursework for us is something that is intellectually interesting and is shaping you in terms of understanding people. And I think including that is important. You'll get the biostats if you need it later on. You can get the other scientific, courses that you need for foundational work. But I think it's important. We don't emphasize as much the humanities
Mhm.
and social sciences, and I think that's one I would recommend.
I agree.
I guess I would add that college is a time to explore. And so, yes, you're about the business of getting into medical school. I get all of that. But um, you know, I was talking to a student a couple of weeks ago, and he was wondering whether he should like double major in biology and biophysics, and whether that would look good on his medical school application. Versus maybe he wanted to major in something or minor in something that was more, I think, social science. And so I said, like, wait, what do you really want to do? He said, I want to do the social science minor. But will it look good on my application that I double minored in or double majored in two sciences? And I told him, like, hey, do what you want to do.
Mhm.
Okay? Do what you want to do. If you really wanted to do the biology and the biophysics, go for it. But if that's not what you really want, then don't do it. And something that I say to the students all the time is, I just love for students to drop out of that transactional mode about their careers and figure out what things are important to me. Where do I want to go? How do I grow myself? How do I be the best me? How do I enjoy college? Okay. And yeah, I concede that yes, there are these things you got to do, but I think if you could also enjoy college, do some of the humanities, um, those things also look good, particularly if they help you develop.
Thank you guys for that. My next question is about activities and kind of extracurriculars to do during your undergraduate career. And of course, as we all know, MCAT and grades are not the only thing that matter in the medical school selection process. So what other kind of activities should students be engaged to help them stand out? And I know I feel like you guys are gonna say do follow what you want to do, but kind of leaving it open.
I think here as well, this is one where, as Dr. DeLisser has mentioned, one can get too transactional or too checklists. I've plenty of folks who have done the checklist that said, hey, I've done my shadowing checkbox, I've done my stint at research, and then there's no sense of depth or sense of authenticity. So your activities are really informed by what drives you. And if you aren't very clear up front, then do some sampling, right? Go ahead and sign up to do research with a professor. Also, I think this one is what challenges folks to be able to gain a little bit more of their voice. I understand that opportunities are not always equally available, meaning that some people really do need to work to even get there. At undergraduate institutions like where I'm from, they're probably just there for the giving. Others, they may have to seek them out a little bit more. And that one actually builds character to be able to get out of your comfort zone to seek out some of those opportunities that are there. And so if you sample a particular area and you realize, well, that one's not for me, as much, then you can, think about some other opportunities. But I do think at the basic minimum, you need experiences that give you face-to-face time with healthcare providers and their patients. Things that give you an opportunity to give of yourself in a sacrificial way, because I believe that helps to develop what we need healthcare providers to be, to not be, to be somewhat selfless in some regard. Opportunities that allow you to problem solve, critical thinking. I think that's where scholarship and research come into play, and working together with teams. And so at a basic minimum, your experience should achieve that, but there must be depth that connects to your individual passion. And hopefully by sampling, you find what that is, where you can go in a little bit deeper. You may need to take a couple of gap years to really define what that looks like. And of course, leadership. And leadership is not one of those things that are these named positions. It's these spaces you find yourself in where you ultimately either become the go-to person, or you begin to develop a voice of advocacy for others. So, advocacy, leadership, clinical exposures, those are the things that I'm looking for.
Can I just add to that? I'm so glad you ended on leadership, because I'd love to pick up right there, because I think that in terms of leadership, people can have prescribed ideas in their minds about what even leadership means. So that they think, well, if I'm not leading the club, if I don't have that name position that Dr. Gibbs mentioned, then am I a leader? Well, there's lots of ways to be a leader. We have, varsity athletes who are giving lots of hours to their craft and are leaders on their teams. That is leadership, and shows, I had varsity athletes in my household. It takes a lot to be a varsity athlete and excel in college. You can play that up in your application without it. There's no pretense about that. It is real. So that is leadership. It can be leadership in your church, in your organization, your community organizations. It can be that you lead in a nonprofit that you formed, maybe very small, but something that you conceptualized and that you helped to develop, or got funding for something that already existed at your school and allowed that to grow and to flourish in a way that it hadn't before. I think that a weakness in leadership is definitely something that hampers individuals applying to medical school. So I would really highlight that. It's not going to be the same type of leadership, but we really do want to see that people have obtained leadership somewhere across their journey. And that may be during their gap years, not during college necessarily, but definitely that also that there is some trajectory to the things that you do. What Dr. Gibbs mentioned about check boxes, when there's no coherent story, yes, you should sample for sure, experience lots of things. But when you go to interview for medical school, they're going to ask you questions about the things that you highlight as your most meaningful experiences. They're going to ask you questions about how you spent your time. You have 700 hours. What did you learn by putting all that time into this thing? Anything on your application is fodder for a question. So because of that, you need to make sure they're things you really care about and that you're excited to talk about.
And that's what I was going to say. I was like, I'm agreeing. I'm just shaking my head, agreeing with everything that everyone said. And I think, students always think about what, like when they go volunteer, I'm doing this, I'm giving this, I'm giving that. But then you also have to think about, what are you getting back from that? You know what I mean? So it's not always volunteer because, I'm going to give everyone, I'm going to do a food drive or a clothing drive and things such as that. Because I think wherever you are, you have to look at the community that you're in, and then think of ways to serve that community. And it could be prom gowns. I don't know. It could be. I'm sorry, all my alarms. It could be something that is not even directly involved in healthcare, but it's just helping someone. And then in your personal statement, and then when you're putting in your activities, also write down, what did you get from doing that? Because there's a lot to be given back as there is to give.
So I think we're saying that we need to have really a developmental growth mindset about our engagement. That is, again, moving away from the checklist. Okay, I guess I need to have 150 hours of shadowing. That will look good, versus using the shadowing to learn about medicine, learn about, here's somebody oh, here's somebody I can model. Or you know what? This is somebody that, you know what? I'm not going to be like. I mean, I'm learning that that's not the type of position I want to be. Or I'm learning how to communicate better. Oh, I'm discovering things about myself. So I think, again, moving away from the checklist and looking at these experiences as opportunities for growth, for development, for maturation, learning about myself, learning about people, learning about medicine. I don't know if we'll come to this, but whenever a student shadows me, I say, you got to bring a book to write in, okay? And you're going to write down questions from me. You're going to write down your observations because it's not just spending time so that you can say you spent 25 hours with Dr. DeLisser. So again, I think we're all saying kind of moving out, you know, kind of a developmental growth mindset, maturation, rather than simply, here are the things I need to do, check the box, good, move on.
Can I add just one other thing to this question? Because I think there are students who find themselves out there who have to, let's say, work to survive, and who may not have available to them the traditional types of opportunities. And I think in those situations, one must think about the spaces where you do spend your time and think about how you can demonstrate leadership, demonstrate service. And those are just as equally valuable. And it's what adds, I think, as we're looking at a holistic view of a candidate, thinking about how they have shown up in the spaces that they found themselves. I don't want those students to discount themselves because they haven't had the traditional type of experiences perhaps that others have. But I feel very strongly that those who are on this journey will find those opportunities for the leadership and service in the spaces that they find themselves, even if it's paid employment and responsibilities to take care of loved ones and things of that nature.
Thank you guys all for that. And you guys kind of read my mind because my next question is, how can like individuals who go into like different extracurricular activities and try that sampling phase where they're trying to find like their passion and niche, how can they write a compelling narrative for, medical school when their activities kind of delve into a little bit of everything? I know from even personally, like early on in college, I kind of explored a lot until I found my like, purpose of what things that I was more passionate of pursuing and delving into. So how can people who kind of go into different activities make that story make sense, I guess, without it looking like they're just trying to check boxes?
I have a lot to say on this kind of thing. So firstly, I'm going to say, Ferris, I admire you a lot. I think students who have engaged with you should use you as a good example of someone who, as you were going through, you are informed by the input of others. It might have said, oh, now is not the time to do, to apply. Let me think about other opportunities because I'm thinking about where I might want to be in the future. And I think, so if you can tell a little story, I'm very hopeful about your success ultimately as a medical student because you've taken those directions. But I do, do think that one needs to be, soberly minded about where they are, reflective, and to understand, if you are starting to write your personal statement and there's not very much there, then that one might mean that you need to, dig in a little bit deeper and think about what additional experiences really help to shape that transformation. I want to see somewhat a personal statement that tells me about someone who may have started off wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, but then becomes through these experiences transformed in a way to know that by the end they are ready to enter this profession. If it starts with essentially just a notion and ends with the notion of, hey, I'm smart and everyone always has told me I'm smart and therefore then that one may not be compelling enough. It needs to be something that's sort of personal and is able to be told and not just with words, but with the experiences informing that conclusion that you're ready.
Thank you for the kind words, Dr. Gibbs. Just a side note.
I would add one thing, and that is that, and again, I totally, completely agree that the whole narrative piece is so important. Like you're telling a story, and I think of the personal statement as you're telling a story that wants to compel an admissions office to interview you and get to know you better. And I think that not waiting until the last minute to decide how that story is going to be told is really critical. And I know we'll spend time talking about personal statements, but in terms of the exposures that you develop early on, check those with people that care about you and that know you and that are involved in the pre-med process. If you're at a school that has good pre-med advising, don't wait until your senior year to go and have a conversation with them. They going to talk to them in your first year saying, this is what I'm thinking about. These are the activities that I care about. They can help you to sort of craft even your thinking around those 4 years. How are you going to use your time? Because everybody gets the same amount of time. So it's really about how you use it. Do you enjoy what you're doing? Are you getting your requisite classes and having enough time to study for them so that you don't have to, your narrative doesn't have to be, well, I didn't do well, but I was doing so many extracurriculars and that's why I didn't do well. That's not a great narrative that you want to carry forward to your senior year. So I think being able to just checking in with some of the leadership at your undergrad, if you're still an undergrad, and you're building your portfolio, so to speak, you don't want to be checking boxes, but you also don't want to be doing the things that you're doing in a vacuum.
Right.
And so, you know, at my school, when I was an undergrad, our Black Pre-Med Society, which was student run, those seniors were very helpful to the first year students, talking about that pacing and not getting overextended and not taking on the weight of the world while you're also trying to pass bio. Those kinds of things, because we were so enthusiastic. It was the seniors who told us, slow it down. You've got 4 years to get it all done. So that's just one example that was very personal to me about thinking about how you want to spend your 4 years in college and allowing people with a little more experience to maybe influence that a little bit so that you're not treading water so much or trying so many different things that won't benefit you and get you where you want to go.
I think it's important that along the way, again, you're continually doing this kind of self-reflection and just questioning and asking like, why am I doing this? Why is it meaningful? What am I learning from this? You know, let's suppose you decide to become a resident advisor. Well, you really think about why you're doing this job, how you're helping students, how you're growing it. So I think getting back to what Dr. Reed said, kind of waiting in a sense to, you know, just before when you have to put this together, it's hard. It's hard versus if all along you've been thinking and reflecting, been journaling, talking to people, some of the peers who are just a couple steps ahead of you, talking to faculty, talking to the pre-med staff. Then when you come to have to put this statement together, it's like you've been doing, in a sense, you've been working on this for 3 years rather than what I hate to see is people take a month to try to put this together. That's just not good.
No other way to say it, has not good. Yeah.
Oh, but on this, oh, go ahead.
So obviously I agree with what everyone's saying, because when, you know, when you figure out, when you learn that you have to have, you know, like there's 15 activity spaces. Sometimes students will wait to the last minute, as you know, everyone's saying, to run and do everything to fill it in. But definitely start early and find out and figure out what you're really, really passionate about. And then, you know, work it from there. It's better to have something that you're passionate about and there's some long-term in it rather than just all over the place because you're trying to, you know, fill in slots in on the application.
And I'll also just mention, because I don't know if we're going to get to this on the personal statements, I think these become a little bit more difficult for students who are doing this right, because it is a challenge sometimes to determine like how much of what is deeply personal and unique to you should be added I think sometimes students struggle with trying to be too much cookie cutter. When the really unique thing that we as admissions officers really value in what will, be compelling may be your individual story, your individual experiences, that compels you to go on this journey. And so and that's for most of the students who I've talked to who said I've spent 6 or 7 months just kind of grappling with this, and I wasn't sure how much to put in or how much to leave out. Those tend to be the ones who I think it ends up being so compelling because they're not trying to be someone else. They're really being themselves and helping us to understand why they are on this journey and what it will mean to them, their families, their communities. And so I would say definitely make sure the authenticity and uniqueness is kept in that process.
Nice.
Thank you guys all for that. And this leads well into my next question, which is about the personal statement.
Mhm.
Why is it so important for med schools for applicants to have like a great personal statement? And what are some red flags that you guys see in people's applicant statements? And kind of like my own addition to that question is how do you decide the best like story angle to utilize in your personal statement if you have, like we said, multiple activities and in your CV?
I think all those have got thoughts on
We
it.
all have something to say about this one. So
I know.
So
what
I
we'll
guess-
do is everybody will grab a different, like we will try not to overlap. We're going to be like +1. Yes,
Yep.
that and
so
that
Uh-huh.
is such a big
What I-
question.
what I think the most important thing is to be authentic. All right,
Mm.
please make it your story, and so you can see statements where people are, I mean, they're taking experiences that honestly, I mean, they're trivial, and you're seeing they're trying to contort it into this epiphany, life-altering experience. And then I see other things, or I think people like they will say things because they think that this is what they need to say,
Mhm.
or this is looking good. And I think many students, or many folks in the audience are going to be students of color, and I think some students feel like there's certain things they gotta say. They've gotta say, I'm all about helping the community. Okay. And I look through the rest of the application, I don't see it. I'm all about addressing disparities, and I want to do public health. And then I look through the rest of the application, I don't see anything that speaks to that.
Mhm.
So what I'm saying for me, and I'll turn it over the rest of to my colleague, please be authentic, which I think in some ways gets back to what we said earlier, Perez, that you have to spend time really thinking about this. And potentially, if when you start to do that work, it's feeling thin, like your motivation to you is unclear, it's not even compelling to you. And maybe you need more time, right? Like you need to have those experiences that help you clarify why I'm doing this and what are the things that are really important to me, and how medicine becomes the vehicle for these things that are really deep within me. So I want you to be authentic. So that's that's what I would say. I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
I would say that we talked about narrative, and that basically is your story. That's what narrative means. It's not a theme. It's not like where my personal statement is exposing something that's not apparent in other parts of my application. It does need to be well written, but it needs to be your story.
Mhm.
And the one piece I would add, +1 to Dr. DeLister, and I would add, it is not a retelling of your CV.
Mm-mm.
We
Don't
have
need
your
that.
CV, we have your other information. It is not a retelling of what you've put in a bunch of other places. So
Yeah.
your narrative, you are the theme of that. It is your story, what makes you a compelling applicant, and why you're going into medicine may be the prompt that you decide to answer, but it is not a retelling of the things that you've done.
I just want to say, I think you should always have someone else, of course, look at your personal statement before you submit it. a couple of people. But when you think you're finished, have someone look at your personal statement. Because I remember like reading personal statements, and most of the students become my friends. And after I read this particular personal statement, I like that person even more than the person that I've always been hanging out with and talking, who comes to my office all the time. When I finished reading her personal statement, I was almost like, this person is so different than, you know what I mean? It was the same person, but I just liked her even more as a person because of her personal statement, because she shared so much about herself that helped, that like her story. And so I think that's what students need to show to the committee, because they're not seeing a person, like in the beginning, they're not, meeting the person, they're just reading your personal statement. But just make sure that they're going to like you and they really know who you are as a person. Because again, they're reading your personal statements before your interview.
And I'll just say that I counsel a number of students, and I like to do, as Ms. Jackson mentioned, meet with them. And actually, before I read a personal statement, before I look at a CV, just chat and talk. And with that, you find out really who they are, because they're extemporaneously really showing you that. And then we get to the personal statement, and sometimes I actually don't see that person there. And that's where there's more work to do. And so that's when we realize, oh, wait a minute, you told me about this in-depth story about how you came to this, but that one isn't there. And perhaps what they're doing is a biographical version. And when I talk about writing personal statements, there can be this sort of biographical component, this introspective and an inspirational part. And so you want to keep that in balance. I think that for me, the most compelling are the introspective ones. And the inspirational ones can be sometimes, if you go too far in that direction, it can not look as authentic. And biographical, as mentioned by Dr. Reed, you really just don't want to have it just outline what your CV or resume looks like. And so using a combination of these things and having someone who can speak into you, like, hey, is this the person who, is this a real story, or is this one you're trying to sort of put together? Because this is what someone said, you had to have paragraph one say this, introduce one, clinical experience, and then do this other thing. Yeah, on the other hand, it also isn't just a creative writing contest. I'll just tell you, I've read some awesome personal statements that look like they literally came out of a creative writing class, because when you connect it to the other parts, it just isn't there, but it's well written. Now that we have ChatGPT and large language models, I think that one may even the playing field for some, and may create a little bit more issues, for others. But it does need to be well written, needs to be authentic, as Dr. DeLisser mentioned, and it can, take a number of different formats, but definitely you have a team of people, not too many, that can help to get you in the right direction.
Thank you guys. Well,
You want to talk about some of the red flags?
oh yeah, that's a big one. We'll all talk at the same time.
The most obvious one is misrepresenting,
Mhm.
the truth. So that one for me, where it's, verifiable, inconsistencies within the application itself, or from other sources. And so do not over exaggerate, because
Don't embellish.
yeah.
Don't embellish. And that'll also come into the interviews as well. I mean, I think Dr. Reed said it earlier. Anything that's in the application is fair game.
That's right.
If you elevate something, like your experience in a lab, you really overstate that, then you have the misfortune of having an interviewer who that's their area of research, and there's actually, I'm talking about myself, meaning, you know, oh man, this is good. I'm looking forward to this interview. And then you're disappointed because the student really inflated their role. So I think really has to be, again, consistency and truthfulness to that. I think that, and I think this is where getting my next point, where I think getting a lot of feedback is important. I do think you can overshare. I do think you can overshare where people are frightened and it's like, you know what, I think we're going to pass on this person. I mean, like, and so I think getting back to what we said before, getting a few different eyes to look at the app, look at your statement, and to make sure that even if it's something that's deeply personal and gripping, it has the right, just has the right tone. There's the right amount of sharing, because it can frighten people if it really feels like there's a little too much sharing going on. So I think getting different eyes to look at the statement and to provide comments. So that would be a red flag if there's really a little too much information here.
And others, I would say, students should be aware that you have an opportunity with the secondaries to do a little bit more of that if you want to get a little deeper into some of those TMI spaces that Dr. DeLisser talked about. The personal statement goes out to everybody. So, you know, just understand that's a broader audience, and you may wish to take some of those more deeply personal stories to the schools that you're going to be really most interested in. But the other thing is that a red flag, and it revolves around the meaningful experiences. I always tell folks that just because something may be personally meaningful does not necessarily make it to one of those 3 meaningful experiences. Because for the meaningful experiences, you really want that to be corroborated in some kind of way by either a letter or some other part. So I don't doubt that it is personally meaningful if you spend just 1 day in a hospice. I think you are going to be transformed in understanding issues around life and death in just that 1 day. But if you only have that 1 hour and you put that as a meaningful experience and someone else really isn't corroborating what that is. So even though it's personally meaningful, it may not make it to that. I'd like to see letters from every meaningful experience. So sometimes it will show up as a red flag if you said, I spent 3 years in this laboratory, right? And this is my most meaningful experience, and I don't see a letter. So that one might be like, what's going on there? So think about how you connect those. So those can sometimes create a red flag, even if there's not really a real story there.
Any red flags, Dr. Reed?
My colleagues have covered so many of them, and I brought it up as a don't do it, which is the retelling of your CV. So I'll bring that up again. Those that do that, I think it reflects that they haven't had enough people take a look, and they really got scared at telling their own story and just sort of reiterated what they've done rather than why they've done it. So I think focusing more on the what I did versus why I did it and what I learned is a red flag.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, the second question, or the next question about the writing part of the application is secondaries. This I would like for you guys all please to answer it. Does your school have a secondary cutoff, and how does your school holistically review its applicants more broadly?
So I can go first. We do not have, we don't have a secondary cutoff. Everyone who applies to Yale School of Medicine will receive a secondary. And how the secondary is looked at holistically is that we have a full committee. We have a full committee that will review all of the applications before a student is offered an interview. So everything, and there's basically a checklist that everyone has to look at and make sure that those areas are covered. So it's not just solely based on MCAT and GPA scores, though a lot of students think so. It's not so much of that. So we look at everything as far as community service, research, or your road travel. Everything is looked at.
We have no cutoff for, I'm assuming you mean only certain people that submit a primary application are going to get a secondary. No, we don't have that. Some people will submit a primary and choose not to, they'll do a primary and choose not to do a secondary, but that's not a decision that's made by us. And ours are also reviewed by several screeners. So I do think it's important to remember, though, that the secondaries are unique to the school. And so the question that is asked by Penn is not the question that's asked by Stanford, which is not the question that's asked by Yale. And so thinking about your secondaries, do not wait until the last minute. When you do get those secondary applications, they need as much thought as the other parts of your application do. And make sure that you're not, there are some things that will overlap and you're able to reuse parts of essays, but you really need to look at them as individual opportunities to continue to tell your story.
Yeah, Penn is similar to the other two schools. There's no secondary cutoff. I do want to stress that thought has to be put into the responses. Again, it's not a good look when you see somebody cut and paste and it's clear that they left the school in from the other cut and pasting, So yeah, so and certainly we try to be holistic. Yeah, I mean, I think we're similar to the other schools. I'm talking about Penn.
Yeah, at Stanford, similar. The only difference is that Stanford actually does not accept transfer students, so we don't transfer. So if someone has previously enrolled at another school, then that one might be or meet the basic eligibility, like for example, they're not on track to earn a bachelor's degree. I mean, that seems, so we do screen and this is only a handful of applications each year, but virtually everyone gets a secondary application to complete unless they meet one of those other criteria. And we've been committed to making sure that all the applications that are submitted, completed, are actually reviewed, so that there's not, folks wasting their time and money to apply. And we understand in our holistic, and that's the main tenet of our holistic process, is to understand that each applicant has potentially the ability to be able to potentially be selected and interviewed, et cetera, by having someone actually take a look at the application. And other parts of the holistic review is making sure that when certain parts of the process might have, certain aspects of the application, open or closed to, let's say, an interviewer that does a closed file interview versus another interviewer. So all these things come together to actually make for our holistic process. So it's a long process, and we put a lot of dedication and effort into every single applicant that comes through.
Thank you guys all for feedback on that. And now I'll want to ask you guys about the interview process, the interview phase. We talked about the classes, the personal statement, the secondary. So let's say students do all those right things and they finally make it to the interview at Yale, Harvard, Stanford, or UPenn. What makes that applicant stand out on interview day, and what are things that you are particularly looking for during the interview process from applicants? And obviously, what are the red flags?
Okay. I will say, I'll just start and be quick because I keep checking the time as well. I would say have questions ready. So I know I'm just going to say Yale. At Yale, we send out a packet of information a couple of days before your interview. So definitely have questions ready. If there's any questions, have them ready. And I would say definitely do your homework about the school. And I would say those are the things that would stand out. The things that you should not do during your interview process is that from the time that you come onto the campus, you're being interviewed. Okay, so if you're in person, if you arrive the day before and you're being housed by a medical student and you all go out for dinner, don't drink too much. Be nice and very courteous to everyone you meet, whether it's someone in the cafeteria, a security guard, the custodial service folks. Be extremely nice to everyone. Everyone knows when it's interview season. Make sure you're very nice to everyone you meet, and definitely, just again, from the time you come on campus and time you leave, you're basically being interviewed.
So a pet peeve of mine is when students, come with questions, right? But it has to be a good question, okay? And I'm warning you, if I'm interviewing you and you ask me a question that you could really find on the website, that tells me that you didn't really do your homework. So I'm the diversity dean. So you asked me, well, tell me about your diversity program here at Penn. Bad question. Okay. Versus, I saw this, I see you have this program. Sounds very exciting. How would I, as a student, get involved with that? Okay. So I think you really want to move away from perfunctory types of questions to questions that really speak to something that you really want to know. And I think, as Linda Jackson said, unless you've done your homework, you will not have found those kind of really genuine, authentic questions. So please don't ask me like, what's your diversity work here at Penn? Because that just sets me off. Anyway, have good questions, but have really authentic, genuine questions that reflect something that you really want to know about.
So at Stanford, we currently use the multiple mini interview, and perhaps I didn't ask everyone, but I think many of us have been in the virtual space for interviews, and we've elected to do ours pretty much exclusively virtual. That saves a lot of time and money for applicants. And so it's a little bit of a shift. Before, I would have said, make sure you pack your stuff on the plane with you and not in the take it in as carry-on. But now I think it's really shaped with the idea that that you want to come, prepared, awake, alert. And we know that it's different time zones when folks are showing up for interviews, and eager to be able to contribute. I do not lose sight on the fact that this is a dual process. And I don't want students or applicants to feel that way either, that it's only a one-way street. I think those of us in this space ultimately know that at the end of the day, that the leverage will ultimately be with you, as the students making a choice as to where you go to medical school. So I think while it is you interviewing the school, as well as we interviewing you, I think there has to be that delicate balance. Otherwise, you could come across as being, too sort of arrogant, and that might not work for you. So understand that balance, and to be able to ask authentic questions, because you are getting to know us as much as we are trying to get to know you. Know your own CV, as that was stated earlier, because if you put something in there, it's all, right for asking about. For us, we do include a traditional type interview along with our MMI, which is a closed file interview. And for that interview, for the MMI, that one is really prepared for basically by engaging yourself in your world and understanding how to do problem solving, teamwork, and usually you're pretty well prepared for that kind of exam, that kind of interview.
I think I would add, we are also in the virtual space, and it has created both opportunities and challenges. So I'm going to say some very basic things that I think we probably all have experienced in this time of virtual interviews. One is that everybody's kind of getting used to it, right? And I'm at work right now, not because I have to be at work at 8 o'clock, but because the Wi-Fi went out in my house, and I didn't want to be on my hotspot trying to be a part of this panel. The reality is that things happen. If you can be in a space that has the strongest Wi-Fi, that's going to be to your advantage, That doesn't mean go buy new Wi-Fi or upgrade, but if it means that you do it at your school or you do it at your grandmother's house, wherever you have a strong signal, that's probably where you want to do it. The other thing that I've seen increasingly is that individuals have more than one screen. So that you might have a couple of different screens. And if you're not looking at the screen that has the camera on it, it may look like you are reading the answers to your questions. So make sure that as you engage with the person on Zoom, that you're actually looking at them. And I've been surprised at how often you're sort of trying to get eye contact and it's Zoom, but we need to look at the camera. The third thing is related to the second, and that is do not write out the answers to the questions you think people are going to give you. You need to come across as authentic. We want to see your full self. That means, yes, be prepared, but don't be so scripted that it comes off like you're reading bullet points. And that is a nuance that I think is important to you'll get better at as you go along. Nerves can sometimes make people seem very scripted. And that's okay, but don't actually be scripted, having written out on the second screen the answers to the questions that you've been asked at other schools. So those are very simple things. Make sure the volume works, that you're is in as quiet a place as you can be. I have interviewed people that are in their cars. That is fine if that's the only quiet space you have. We try and check any biases that we have ourselves and make sure we're not judging people based on the environment, but really listening to the answers that you're giving to those questions. But that being said, good Wi-Fi, good audio actually is really important, so that, again, because it will make you nervous if things happen and things go out. That being said, things do happen in the virtual space. Wi-Fi clicks off, something happens and your audio goes out. Everybody has had that experience at least once as an interviewer, and it can become something you laugh about once everybody reconnects. Don't lose your composure. Things happen. It's different than being in person, and we're all getting used to that, but don't read your answers. Make sure you're looking at the camera, please, and make sure that your authentic self comes across in a way that really shows how incredible you are.
Thank you guys all so much for that. My next question is related to school selection. So what are factors that can help an applicant decide if a school is a good fit for them, especially with mission statements being somewhat similar to each other at times? Where can students also go to learn more about the school besides just like the website, like what you mentioned, Dr. DeLisser?
I mean, I think some of this is really personal and idiosyncratic. I mean, I think you have to have, again, a sense of what do I want to do with my career? What type of community do I want to be in? Like, I think if you want to do rural medicine, don't come to Penn. I mean, we could help you get there, but I can think of a bunch of other schools where if rural medicine is really what you want to do, Penn is not the place. So, I mean, that's somewhat of an extreme example, but I think having a sense of what your goals are, what you want to do with your career, and what a particular institution, whether a particular institution is able to get you there. I think thinking about the community that you're going to be in, is this the place you want to be? And I think also getting a good vibe for the medical school community. Does this feel like, I feel like, yeah, these feel like my people, or this feels like a safe, welcoming place. Do I like the curriculum here? Does this feel like this type of learning suits me? So I think those were some of the things I would put on the table. That said, some of it is going to be really, you come for the second look interview or second look visit, and you're bitten, and it's just, I love this place. Or it may be that you've got two places that are pretty equal, and then I think then money then becomes, I think, a legitimate factor in terms of the financial aid. I don't think that should be necessarily the absolute number one thing, but when things start to get relatively equal in terms of the other stuff, yeah, then I think money can also be a factor as well.
Right. I would say speak to medical students, speak to current medical students. Um, I would also look for what are the things that's going to help you get through medical school at the difficult times. So, like, what support do they have for whatever your situation currently is, or what it is at that time. So, for instance, like if you know that you may need help with test taking, is there someone there that's going to support that? Um, is there a community there for you? Um, if you know one of the things that's going to help you decide if a school is going to be uh, well, a good fit for you. I'll be honest, if you want to see Black people, and it's important for you to see people that look like you, you have to really look at the school and is that population there to support you? So I think, again, speak to students and the support that you need in a difficult time, a time of struggle. Location, is there a DEI office that's there for you as well?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add because I do think the students are oftentimes the most compelling, corroborators of what the environment really is. I think sometimes administrators can say this is what we do, but it really is the students who say this is how I have engaged in this space, understanding that there are resources that may be available and students can tell you about how they've been able to use those. Increasingly, I feel like I've been very humbled by the fact that in the recent years that students have come in later years and said, you know what, I came here because I saw someone like you in leadership. And I think it cannot be understated that when people can see themselves in the place that that makes them feel like they could be there. And so I'm always fighting to make sure that there's a diverse group of people that students can find themselves in, whether it be a researcher doing the research that you really want to be involved in, or if it's an advocacy effort. And in my space, I've been able to help, forward efforts in, for persons with disability to make sure that there's a space for them here at our school. And so, or in other ways as well, it's always humbling when I hear that I saw myself here because I saw you there. And so, yeah, look for those individuals that help you to feel that you truly can have a sense of belonging at that particular school.
Mhm.
I would just add one thing, and that is I agree with everything that my colleagues have said here. You are the social media generation. Everything that you've grown up with social media in a way that most of us did not. There are so many great ways to get to know the students at schools through their social media presence. Some of the student organizations have Instagram and have their own YouTube channels. There are videos from almost every med school that the students have put together, first years or fourth years. They really do give a sense of sort of the character of the school. And then, of course, very easy to identify whether or not the school teaches on with a lecture-based formats. Do they give you early clinical exposure? Is that something you would like? Or would you like the more traditional 2 years in advance? Is it case-based learning? Or is it a mix of both? Most medical schools have done some transformation over the last 10 years in terms of curriculum. I don't know any that have not incorporated more clinical experiences earlier and have incorporated some form of case-based. Some have gone all the way to case-based. Others mix it in various parts of the curriculum. This is all information that's available to you, and then you have to know yourself well enough and talking to others walking through that to see if that really speaks to the way that you have learned in the past or the way that you think you would like to grow in the future. But I think you use those resources that are available to you. Yes, you can talk to students, but there's a lot of it that's going to be available to explore using the internet and social media in ways that were not available to all of us that had to go around and visit every school to get any kind of feel of it.
Thank you guys so much for that and for your insight on that question. This next question is a pretty big topic for everyone here. So with the recent SCOTUS decision, the Supreme Court decision, how did that impact your schools with respect to diversity? And how will schools be able to acknowledge diversity within an applicant pool? And for us applicants, what are ways to showcase your diversity to school now? What are ways to showcase your diversity to schools now?
Well, I'll speak first. I'll just say that while the Supreme Court decision was likely a very strong disappointment for many, I'll just say those of us who've been in this space, it was never as simple as the way I think it might have been characterized. Fortunately for us, we've never used race as a sole criterion on making a decision for our, for our selection of students. This idea of a holistic approach to each and every student, where you're looking at the context in which they have found themselves, their opportunities, their challenges, their trajectory individually for them and how they connect to the mission of your school is how we've essentially always done that. The fact that the range of things that define our either identities and our paths should not be included in among a group of things is something that I think would have been somewhat concerning. So we've never really used that as an individual factor. I think the change now is that somehow it now cannot be used as any factor. And so that particular shift has occurred. But I think because we've had such a robust system of holistic review that never relied completely on that, I think we'll be in good shape. And I think the onus will be on students to really be able to share a little bit more about how they've come to their journey. So it will be about the experiences. And so I'm actually hopeful, but I do know that in the challenges in states who have had similar or even more extended roles like California, Michigan, and others, that you can emerge and be able to develop systems that are robust enough to really understand the journeys of the students and the missions and embed in their missions the kind of work they really want to be forwarding.
I totally agree. I think the holistic review for schools that had that approach, we've been preparing for this, right? With the approach, the holistic review of every application it puts us into a good place. What I want to encourage students is that if your experience as a diverse individual, diversity very broadly defined, if that is what led you to medicine or some experience along your journey led you to medicine, it's okay and actually preferable for you to write about that. So though we do not see race or ethnicity in our review of applications, it is not there. If that's important to you in your motivation, you can write about it. We cannot consider it and do not consider it and never have considered that as an individual factor. It's really about your story. So don't let a Supreme Court decision truncate your story or tell your story. Give us the information that is important so that we can holistically review who you are and what you would bring to our individual schools.
I think all I can say is ditto to what's been said. I think all of us have had holistic review where not even so much whether you check the box, right? That's never, but what's the experiences that you bring that potentially would enhance the experiential diversity of our class, because we actually use that diversity to do our education, particularly since so much of the learning actually occurs not from me to the student, but from the student to the student, okay? And so we want to capture richness of experiences, not labels, but richness of experiences. And that's always been, I think, the approach of all of our schools, where it's the story, it's the narrative, it's the journey, and how that's going to help us ultimately create a cohort where there is learning, yes, from us as faculty, but also, more importantly, from the students. So tell your authentic story. Don't make up something, though, okay? Don't make up something, but tell your authentic story. And if there are experiences around race and identity that have inspired, that have informed, that provide the North Star for your future career, we got to hear about that.
I agree with all that's been said.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for that clarification and reassurance. My next question is for non-traditional applicants. How did your school measure the distance traveled for non-traditional applicants who took growth years to work on their metrics?
And what are you defining as non-traditional?
People who don't go straight into a medical school after their 4 years of college,
Mhm.
gap years.
That's more traditional now.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my comment too, that
Yeah.
we don't necessarily think of things as traditional or non-traditional, though there are some examples of, one that where you might say, oh, this is not traditional. You've taken a whole new career, you've, studied in a particular area, you've now gone back, and now that one might be considered that. But since, like I said, since it was stated earlier, around 70 to 80% of the entering classes do, gap or growth years, I guess that's what you're calling it, then there's not that much non-traditional about that. But what we were saying in our holistic approach is that every application and every applicant is viewed in the context of their trajectory and their approach, right? And so, but to the question that you have of people who have done, let's say, a post-bac or some other enriching experiences to enhance a portion of their application that they found maybe not as strong, I think we would view that as being favorable. However, I'll say sometimes people will focus so much on the metrics that they begin to do all these things to try to, and then they realize they left the other things alone, like they weren't during that time spending time engaging in clinical activities or volunteerism, etc. And then they go and like, oh, my MCAT is better or my grades are better, and I still didn't get in. And it's because of that whole, the totality of the application. And so not to set my advice would be not to sacrifice one for the other as you're making those decisions.
Thank you. And this question, Dr. Gibbs, I'd like your perspective on this particularly, and it's talking about we want to ask you about the Casper and the preview exam of application process. So for those who don't know, the Casper and preview are situational judgment tests that some medical schools use as part of the application process.
So medical schools have found themselves in very difficult situations because, even I think, what was it, 2020, 2021, our applications like skyrocketed and many are still going up. And I know that as we were thinking, what are some validated tools that might help us to either sort applications, sort of screen in a meaningful enough way that we're not disadvantaging students. So situational judgment tests, just as the multiple mini interview, are ways in which we may pose questions that get at oftentimes a more non-cognitive or non-grade-based aspects of who this individual might be. Now, historically, the situational judgment test was not necessarily as validated against those as MMI. So oftentimes people will use this Casper or situational judgment test as one part, but not an exclusive part of a sort of screening process. And so we have not used those in our screening, but there was part of me that said that if we stayed at that 10,000 applications every year, we might incorporate that. But I think this is how some schools are using that is as an adjunct to being able to sort out, applicants in the application process.
Thank you so much. All right, this question is more generally for everyone, and you're all very well established individuals in your field. How do you guys define success, and how did that change from the time you were an undergraduate to medical school or grad school to residency and to now your current positions as physicians and faculty members?
I laugh. Success for me is just being happy.
I mean, I guess some of that,
Mhm.
I guess what I thought of as success as, like, so success in the beginning, I guess for me was like getting into medical school, right? So I got there. And then the next level of success was getting into a good residency. And then I guess the next level was getting into a good fellowship. So I think early on, there's a tendency to have these very concrete milestones that one can achieve. And I guess in some ways that's always part of it. So, you get a faculty's position, then you get your tenure promotion, then you get more leadership. So I think some of those things are part of success. But I think I do want to second what Linda Jackson just said, that at some point success has to kind of move away from some of these externals, which I think are important, and that you have to define success in other ways, particularly about making sure that your soul stays well and healthy in all of this, that you don't, in the process, lose who you are, maybe lose relationships. So I think so some of it, I think, yeah, there's certainly the external things that we're all judged by, and I think are legitimate, but I think also thinking about some of the interpersonal well-being as being also key elements of success. So I think that's how I might answer that question.
Yeah, but can I just also say, I think because we do pathway programs and we meet so many students, I think success also is seeing the students that you mentored
Sure.
come through. So, yeah, I think I thought, I mean, that makes me feel that what I'm doing is worth doing. Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because on Friday, for those who don't know,
Match day.
Friday was match day,
Mm-hmm.
and it was actually a sweet day for me, because there were several students that, as I looked at, they had difficult journeys, and I'm going to say humbly, I was part of their success. And
Mm-hmm.
you're right, Linda, just on Friday, be able to
Right.
look down and see those students and feel good that I, in a small way, was part of their success. So I agree with you. Like, other people's success,
Mm-hmm.
I think also is an indication of success. I agree with you.
Definitely.
Wow. I'm going to echo everything that you all have said, but I will put out this admonition to those who are in this space, because this is a long journey. And so I think success defined on an achievement basis alone will find you in a place where it may feel very, you know, like despair and lonely at certain times. So I don't think you should focus your ideas of success in those alone, that sense of what brings you. If it's only defined also by happiness, those are things that are come and go too, especially in this journey, right? You might have a good test score, you might not. But that sense of what brought you here, making sure you're true to that, as Dr. DeLisser mentioned, will always keep you grounded. And in this space will also help to develop that resilience that will be needed in this space. So for me, it's to keeping that sense of self, whether or not this is a good day or bad day, to know and to make sure that I really know that this is what I'm still here for. Now, as you get farther into medicine, like we are right now, our well-beings are often challenged by the fact that we even have something of, moral injury of the idea that we come here every day to help people. And sometimes with the bureaucracy of things, you might not achieve that goal. But knowing that deep down inside that is what you are still committed to. And like Dr. Lisser, this last Friday was awesome for me too, to see students make it to that next phase and to have seen them be so shaped and developed in their as I said earlier, their professional identity formation, despite some challenges. It just brings such great joy. And so that's where I know I have a purpose, and that is success for me, that to live out that purpose. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
It's funny, we do these entrance conversations with individuals that are linked to our Office of Recruitment and Multicultural Affairs. And one of the questions that I started asking when I came back in 2020 was, how do you define success and how do you best receive support? Because of course, both of those things are very individual, right? And one of the most interesting answers that happens repeatedly around this question of success is, for most of them, success was defined as getting to medical school. And now that they're here, they realize that they have to redefine it. It's not about a grade because everything's pass fail. It's not about, competing against other students because it's a collaborative curriculum. And it's not about getting to medical school because now you're here. And I feel similarly. And so part of our conversation is how they're going to redefine that. And then we talk to them a year later, they've got a different way of thinking about it. And what I love is that for all of us here, success morphs over time. And I think that being successful to me is being useful to others, being able to end the day. Not every day is successful. Many of them are not, but being able to say, I put forth the best part of myself that I had to give on that day. And some days it's a lot you have to give, and other days you just don't have as much. There are going to be busy days that don't feel great, but knowing that I put my best foot forward with what I had is success to me. And then the other piece of success to me is being able to change directions when I need to change them. And so being that resilience that Dr. Gibbs mentioned, and that flexibility, and really reassessing our own happiness and redefining success over time is extremely important to me. And so I don't have one answer. It's really about putting forth my best when I can, and being satisfied that I didn't try and short shift anybody, and that I've got flexibility and resilience. That's success to me.
Thank you guys. These are beautiful answers, and very helpful for myself as well. For I feel like in this journey is always like, well, what's the next thing? What's the next accomplishment you can make, or trying to like chase that next dopamine burst or whatever. But thank you guys all for that. And I just want to close this with one last question, because we're at the time. And I just want to ask each of the panelists, what departing message or insight would you like to share with our audience? We have a large, beautiful audience here, about 120 people. So what would you guys like to let them go home with?
Well, I'll just start. And this one I learned from I've been using it recently. I've learned it from a colleague of mine who's at Duke and finishing her PhD there, Anjali Boyd. And it's been sticking with me, this idea of lifting as you climb. No matter where you are on this journey, you actually have something to teach those who are traveling, behind you. And whatever knowledge you have, please share that. Whatever insights you have, share that as well. Because along this entire path, we all are always continuing to try to aim for higher aspirations. But if we lift others up as we are ourselves are ascending, then I think we'll be the much better for that. So lift as you climb.
So I guess I would maybe in some ways affirm what Dr. Reed just said, that be about excellence of effort. Put your best in every day. I think if you focus on the good effort, more often than not, you get a good result. Not all the time, but more often than not, pursuing excellence is what I would encourage you to do.
I would encourage you to always ask for help when needed. Sometimes, depending on where you are, you may feel that you're the only one who don't know, so you won't reach out for help. But while you sit there not knowing, there's others that don't know as well, and others know where to get support. So make sure that whatever help you need, whatever support you need, make sure that you're able to seek it out and not afraid to ask for it. And find a community. The community, it doesn't have to be someone in medicine. It could be the custodial service folks. It could be the lady in the dining hall, but just always find some community, find support, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
And I totally agree with everything. I feel like I'm just, not trying not to restate what I think have been such incredible pearls here. And I would just add too, and I know that I speak for all of us, that leaning into mentorship is really important, and that it's not always easy, but allowing others not just to help you, but asking for opportunities. Sometimes people are getting lots of opportunities that they're just bold enough to ask. All they can say is no. If they don't agree, you got other places to go, but really lean into those opportunities, even sometimes if it's a little out of your comfort zone. And then the other thing I'd like to leave you with is I just want these 120 plus students and others to know we are so proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
All of you are our greatest hope for medicine to become what it needs to be. And how encouraged are we that Ferris was able to pull together 120 plus students to come and listen to us for over an hour to talk about this. We are so proud of you, and we wish you nothing but the best. We know that putting your best foot forward and recognizing that this is a journey, not a sprint. I think you're all going to do very well.
Right. And Ferris, if you like, you could share my email with, with everyone.
Sounds good. I will. Thank you guys so much.
Ferris, I think the four of us want to salute you. I mean, the effort you put into corralling us, the way you put together the questions and the agenda. So really it's a testimony to you as well. So I think the four of us would certainly want to salute you as well.
Definitely.
For sure. The leadership
Yep.
you are showing.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so
Proud
much.
of you.
I also want to thank the medical students that are answering questions in the Q&A and chat.
Yeah.
You are amazing.
I was just gonna say that. Thank you guys all, and they're about to come on right now after you guys. And so how that's gonna go for the audience is you guys can just raise your hand, and then you can kind of like unmute yourself and ask your questions directly, and they'll be able to, instead of typing your answers, talk to you guys via audio. But again, thank you guys all so much for your wonderful reflections. You are helping so many students. You're helping me and everyone else here. I'm super grateful for each and every one of you. And I know everyone here is grateful. A lot of people are already like messaging me like this is amazing. So thank you guys all, and thank you for your time. And I hope we can do this again maybe in the future.
Sure.
Other areas.
Mm.
So
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good
everybody.
night.
Good night. Thank you
Good
to
night,
my
everyone.
colleagues. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.
All right, now we're gonna have the med students that you guys have been talking to come on live, and we'll have them introduce themselves. Let me start. We can just start right away with Donovan. Go ahead, the senior of the group.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Donovan, a fourth year medical student, born and raised in the Bahamas. Undergrad in Minnesota. I did a gap year. I taught English in Tokyo. Then I got to Michigan Medical School, did a dual degree at the University of Cambridge. And then I just matched into emergency medicine at Harvard. So nice to see all of you.
Brother. Chris, you can go ahead.
Hi, my name is Chris. I also go to Michigan. I'm an M2. I'm from Iowa. I went to Harvard for undergrad, and then I took a year off to do like teaching in Boston. And then I started med school like 2 years ago, so I'm a second year, and I'm currently doing clinical rotations. So.
I guess I can go next. Hey everyone, my name is Alon. I'm an M1 here at Michigan. I did my undergrad here at Michigan as well. I was a dual degree in biomolecular science and jazz studies. Really excited to be here and talk to y'all.
I can go. Hi guys, I'm Hiob. I grew up in California, went to Penn for undergrad. Now I'm a G0, which is kind of in between like third year of medical school and starting my PhD, so I'm about to transition. Yeah, excited to see you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Chidera. I'm an M1 like Alon. I'm from Minnesota. I went to undergrad at Boston University and now I am here.
Hey, beautiful. I'm just gonna open the floor again for questions, so you guys can basically raise your hand, attendees, anyone, and any questions you have, just come ahead and ask it, or you guys can type in the chat and we can get those answered. We only have about 20 minutes, so use your time wisely. I also was going to, if no one who has a question live, I was going to go look at the questions that people have sent with the registration and ask those, but we do have someone, so I'll allow you to, I will unmute. So, and I think it's Mehret.
Yeah, Maharet is the American version. Mehret is my real name. I am Abisha. I think there's an Abisha. Yep, I recognize you. But yeah, so my question is, I'm currently in my gap years. I currently work in consulting, but thinking of applying not this cycle, but next cycle, currently studying for the MCAT. So just kind of any advice on how to continue to demonstrate that like medicine is where I want to be as somebody who's coming kind of like from industry now. And also just any tips on like personal statement. Yeah.
Okay, I guess anyone could just go. Since you're applying in not this cycle, the next cycle, I think you have plenty of time to kind of demonstrate your engagement with medicine. Medicine is kind of what you make it. There are a lot of things you can do to connect your passions with medicine. So I would say the best thing to do is the thing you want to do. And that is what kind of shows in your interviews, in your application. So if you're going into industry and consulting, pick up projects that relate to medicine or that you can kind of spin to show that this is medically appropriate or like in some tangential sense appropriate for understanding in the future. Like as a physician, you'll be able to talk about what it means to talk about drug pricing, for example, or what it means to talk about like healthcare economics. So I think there are many ways you can spin anything you do to fit within your narrative as long as it's passion, as long as it's a passion of yours.
Well, that's very encouraging. I've been on a Medicaid project for about like 2 years, and as a previous Medicaid recipient, this is something I'm definitely passionate about. So that's really encouraging to hear. So that aligns.
Next we can go with Emanuela. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
Yeah, sorry, it's Emanuela. But my question is like all of you have like been in med school, some of you are in different years. So I like have noticed that with me, I work a lot when I'm in my undergrad, but in med school, how does that look like? Do any of you have another job associated while you're working, while you're in med school, or and how does that look like with time management and with your workload?
So I think pretty much everyone in our school kind of treats med school as their job. I know of one person who works a job only 1 day a week, but I think just the sheer rigor of med school kind of uh, focuses you in on just devoting to school. Um, I'm a musician, so I do still gig every once in a while, but I've definitely had to cut back on that. But I do know, like my friend that I mentioned who does that job 1 day a week, she's able to manage her time. Just as long as you know, keep your schedule straight, keep on top of the material. And one thing, this is more general with med schools, you'll kind of find a rhythm of like how much you really need to study and learn. Because you're not going to know every detail. It's just impossible. And so, yeah, it's a lot of just managing your time and that kind of stuff. But I think most would probably recommend really focusing on school and not having any outside jobs and stuff and really just hone in on that.
Thank you so much. Next we have Gene. Go ahead and speak.
Hi, my name is Jean Pierre. My question is basically, so I'm applying to this cycle, and I have pretty much everything that I need to get, like, not what I would say I've done everything as far as credentials. The only thing that I'm really missing currently is the MCAT, which I plan on taking a little late in the cycle. So the cycle opens May, and I plan on taking my MCAT mid-July. So is there any advice that you could give me as far as how to go through that process and basically just make sure that I'm still a well-rounded applicant? I get taken seriously in the application cycle, even though I'm applying without a score, an immediate score, and also to relieve the pressure of the one-shot kill for this one MCAT that I'm taking. Um, I can try talking about it. So I didn't end up doing what you did, but I think because I think I ended up taking it a little bit earlier, but I think for the most part, you can't, like schools will allow you to apply without an MCAT score, and you could just submit the rest of your application. I know another student who was also part of this panel, she mentioned that she applied to like a few schools without her MCAT score, and then later on when she got her score, then she applied to like the rest of the schools. So that's a way that can like kind of reduce that kind of stress in terms of like what score you end up getting and like choosing kind of what you want certain schools to see. I think that could also be an option as well. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure if anyone else has any other ideas on that too.
The idea of like a one-shot kill MCAT, I don't think, I'm assuming that's like you take the MCAT once and you feel like that's the only chance you get. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, so I know people who've gone into Michigan, taken the MCAT 3 times, and that's A-okay. I work on the admissions executive committee as well, and I've seen people who take MCAT. I would say upper 3 times is about the limit. Obviously your first try should be your best try, like give it all you got. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. And then, if you don't do well the first time, try again, but make sure you're being intentional about trying and have a reason as to why it might not go well. A lot of admissions committees want to see that you are obviously growing, and that you have some reasoning as to why potentially like something didn't go well. But I would say for the most part, at least in Michigan, um, you're not gonna if you take the MCAT 3 times, you're not gonna like not look at your application, especially if the last time like you did pretty well.
Thank you guys for that. Next in line we have Ashley. You can come on and ask your question.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay, my name is Ashley. I'm currently a postdoc at NIH, and my question for Hiab or anybody else who also was considering applying MD PhD, what advice do you give to someone who's like, currently about to submit applications, but is still not 100% sure if they want to get an MD PhD or just like get an MD and heavily focused on research like as well, because you can see research like within your like future in your career in the future, like what advice would you give? Did you split your application? Did you do like a 60-40? And do like schools know if you split the application?
Yeah, so just in terms of splitting application, I did split. I applied to both MD and MD PhD programs. I'm not sure if they knew. I was probably asked on the cycle, and I did say I did say that I split, and I think they all understand because like you are applying as an MD PhD, and that's like pretty competitive. So I was just like I just don't know if I would get in. So that's why I decided to split. The number one question you get asked when you're applying MD PhD is like, what do you foresee as your split? And like that answer can range from like 50-50 to like 80% research, 20% like clinical practice. And I think in the most part, when you do the MD PhD application, you do both the medical school application and PhD application and an MSTP like interview/application. And basically they want to see that when you talk about your research, you know your research, you're passionate about your research, and that this idea of translational research is something that you're very passionate in, whether that be like a 50-50 split or an 80-20 split. And so demonstrating that I think is like the most important part. And that doesn't mean like you have to have like 5 published papers. I like applied MD PhD and I had no publications. And it was just because I like knew what my research was and I was able to like show that when I was describing to them, and everybody knows that like research takes like years to do. So yeah, I don't know. Did I answer all your questions? Sorry. Or did
Yeah,
you
I
have?
think you did. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Was it my turn? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Okay, hi, my name is Lena. I am an undergrad student, and recently me and a team of students at my college have been researching the recent decline of Black physicians. And I just wanted to overall get everybody's opinion on why do you guys think that there is such a huge decline of Black physicians in 2024, as well as what advice would you give to future physicians of color?
So it's funny you brought that up. We it would have been last month, hosted a showing of the documentary Black Men in White Coats, which is, if you all haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. You can screen a rental for like $10. But it talks exactly about that, why there's so little representation in the field of medicine, and especially with Black men. When my dad applied to med school, the rate of Black male doctors was higher than it is now, and he went to med school in the 70s or 80s, early 80s, excuse me. So 40 years on, and we're worse than we were almost 4 decades ago. And there's a lot we can talk about society, the way our racial social structure has precluded the decline and the general lack representation in the field of medicine. And I think I've found that what we can do, I guess, in the meantime is, as potential med students, to just show up, be there, be present. I think there's a lot. It's not going to happen overnight. We have a lot of work to do from the ground up, starting with the education, the 4th grade syndrome, which is a really fascinating concept of how Black kids and their education kind of get stifled across the board by 4th grade. So really working to uproot some of those more systemic issues. But it's tough because the whole way this country was founded was on racial grounds. So
I also think for maybe some of y'all, there's just a lot of is a very high barrier of entry to get into medical school. There's a lot of financial costs and time costs and planning that nobody talks about. And I feel like for other groups, their community is able to make space for them. They're not expected to do they're not expected to have certain responsibilities that maybe us as Black students do. So for example, a very close friend of mine actually got accepted into medical school, but she's thinking about not going because of family stress. She doesn't have a supportive family anymore. Money is tight. Now she no longer lives with her family due to that family stress. And she's like, how am I supposed to afford it? And I was like, girl, Uncle Sam, like, we just don't have those conversations about like how things are going to be paid for, or we have this feeling of like, if it has to be loans, I can't pay it off. Well, you would be surprised. A lot of our white classmates have more loans than I do, but they'll never tell you. So sometimes that's your reality, and sometimes it's your reality of scholarships. But either way, I just think we don't have enough. We don't really anticipate those barriers. The barriers are higher for us. We just don't have the capital in terms of time and money the way other students do. So I think when you're thinking about yourself as a Black student, you have to think, okay, what are my barriers? What's my current situation? What's my family like? Like, who can I actually rely on? Who is consistently giving me good advice in my life? Lean on them. And unfortunately, when it comes to getting into medicine, you have to be selfish in terms of your goals, which is not really how we operate as a community. We always are thinking about other people, taking care of other people. Oh, I got this cousin back in Nigeria. I got to give them this. You can do all of that, but you're going to have to do it later. And they're just going to have to understand. You really have to think about yourself, and you will have time to think about other people. But right now you got to think about yourself. I mean, that's my personal opinion. But I just think that's the best advice.
Thank you for that. Also stemming back to the fourth grade syndrome that Alan, you were talking about, I believe I'm pronouncing your name right. How do you feel about, we actually just were reading about a study in one of my classes where they asked, I forgot what med schools it was, but they asked the med school students if people of color could feel, or their nerves felt as much pain as Caucasians, and 20% of them actually believe that people of color do not feel the same pain and can tolerate more pain than Caucasian people, which of course we all know that is false. So my question is, do you guys believe your education is fully rounded, contributing to all races, and is very inclusive? That's one of my fears of going to med school, that I will get taught predominantly based, or my education will be predominantly towards one race. Of course, Caucasian. Also, how the Black fetus image actually came out not too long ago either is pretty shocking as well. But basically, going back to my question, do you guys believe that your education is fully rounded, including all races?
Absolutely not. That's like that. The medical system and probably any industry in America is just based off of one, the labor of Black persons, like native land, all those things essentially, and they're inherently racist. A lot of the research that we have in medicine, again, in every field in the country, is based off of the majority population. So when you talk about guidelines or recommendations, a lot of the time those things don't apply sometimes to persons of color or different ethnic groups, because the persons who are in those research studies are usually majority white. And so trying to extrapolate the data from that does not allow it to work sometimes on skin of color. I will say though that many schools are having their renaissance where unfortunately they are relying on students of color to like correct these issues, but they do acknowledge that there are issues in, or holes in, a lot of the curriculum. So I know at Michigan, for example, we had a whole skin of color curriculum developed in different departments. So like the dermatology department had one, surgery department had one, emergency medicine had one, just because there were pathologies and diseases that weren't being addressed in different communities, such as the Black community as well. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think any medical school you go to should be able to acknowledge that that work needs to be done, if they can't acknowledge that, that's an issue. But I think again, it's not well-rounded, but it is I think aspiring to be so.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for
Yeah,
that.
we have one last question. Aya, you can come on and then we'll wrap this up.
Um, Thank you guys for taking your time to do this panel and everything. I appreciate it. So I'll just answer the question. I wrote this down. What are the support systems are in place for medical students to maintain a healthy work-life and balance while managing stress during the rigorous training and learning? Did you guys see that? Hello?
I don't think I heard it probably, but if you can
Could you
repeat it.
repeat it one more time? Sorry.
Oh, you guys didn't hear that? Oh, sorry. I said, what are the support systems are in place for students to maintain a healthy work-life balance and managing stress while during the rigorous training and learning?
So during M1, so I think first and foremost, we have a lot of student services. We have something called M Home, which is kind of this peer support system. And they will host a bunch of different events to kind of get you out of the classroom and get you, just kind of take your mind off school. I think Michigan in general, and I'm biased because I did my undergrad here, but I think the community here is really supportive. I think the curriculum has sort of shifted to help support that collaboration, cutting out the pass fail, or cutting out grades and going to pass fail to sort of get rid of the competition that med school was kind of known for back in the day. And having BMA, the Black Medical Association here, is definitely a great support system. When you have sort of that lived experience, they're just those things you don't have to say, but you can kind of give a look to your Black peers when something's up, and just having that reassurance is really great.
I'll add, so Michigan, like Alonso, I think has changed over time. I think it'd be good to like look at specific medical schools because not every medical school has the resources that Michigan has. Like for example, we have free therapists and we get free psychiatry visits as well that we can go to if times are rough or whenever needed. We also each person's assigned a house counselor that we can talk to if we're going through personal things or life issues. There are multiple layers in place for students who may be failing part of the curriculum or a block, and so there are also peer support advocates like Alanta, the different identity organizations. So for me, BMA was probably the biggest kind of source of support. Like all of my best friends from Michigan are like a part of BMA and pretty much have kept me afloat when I've gone through my whole spirals in medical school, because you will go through spirals in medical school because it is not easy. But again, there are systems in place to help, and it is kind of on you really to reach out to your friends and to your counselors when things are getting tough. Like as an adult learner, you kind of would be expected to know when things are going awry. And that's just kind of the way it is. But I think we can all kind of get through it, but we have to recognize, when it is hard, like it's okay to say it's hard and to ask for help.
All right. Thank you guys all for coming in today. Thank you guys for all your help with the first part of the session. I know it was a lot of questions coming in, so I apologize on their behalf for all the typing you guys had to do. But thank you guys, everyone, for coming today, and the panelists, the students. I know you guys are all super busy. I know everyone here appreciates it. I surely appreciate it. And if you guys wonder if you guys mind, would you like me to share your contact with the attendees, or is that okay? All right, sounds good. Sounds good. But okay, this is the end of the panel webinar event. And again, thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.